Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining us. We will get started with the webinar in about 1 minute. You should be here to learn about ecosystem service values for Texas. So we'll give just another minute to make sure everybody gets logged on, and then we'll get started. Okay, it seems like people are slowly trickling in still a little bit, but slowing down a little bit. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Charis York. I work for the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. And I'm so glad all of you could join us today. We're excited to tell you about this project we've been working on with AECOM, looking to value ecosystem services specifically for our lands in Texas. This is a resource that can be used for communities, for engineering firms, landscape architects, anyone who's looking to move the needle on green infrastructure projects and is looking for values to put in the cost-benefit analysis so that we are properly valuing these things in Texas. So before we get started, I mentioned I am with the AgriLife Extension Service. We are part of Texas A&M University. We have offices in more than 250 counties across the state of Texas, and we run programs including 4-H, Master Gardeners, Master Naturalists, Healthy Texas, and a lot of other things. My team is specifically in the Disaster Assessment and Recovery Unit. We are what we call the blue sky arm of DAR, or the mitigation side of things. So we work with communities before and after disasters when the skies are blue to try and help bring them resources that will make them more resilient and help them to bounce back the next time disaster comes to their community. Because in Texas, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to see that next disaster. Specifically, my team is Green Infrastructure for Texas. We are based out of Houston, and we work specifically with communities to understand what green infrastructure is and how they're able to utilize it as a tool to solve issues that they are facing as a community. So next slide. So the project team for this has been myself, Christy Taylor, who's also with the GIFT team. She is our wetland expert. And we also have on the line today, Ayana Baptiste. Christy and Ayana will be following the Q&A and the chat. So please use those two functions. We'll talk about them in a few minutes. And I mentioned previously, AECOM has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this project. And so today we have Annie, I know your name, Annie DeBoer and Christina Viedny. And you'll be hearing from both of them as we move forward today. So next. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping items. I know we're all pretty used to webinars, but just a reminder that we do have in Teams that Q&A box. So if you can hit the next, should have an animation that pops up there. At the top of your screen, there you go. That red box should highlight the Q&A. We would encourage you guys as we go along, if you have questions, to enter them into that box. Christy will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. If it's something we can answer or provide a link to, we'll do that. If not, we'll circle back to those questions at the end of the webinar. If you have a question that you think is too long to type out, go ahead and mention that you have a question and what the topic is. And when we get to the end, we will try to unmute you and let you ask that question yourself. The other function we have, if we can go to the next, there we go, is the chat function. So we're encouraging you not to put questions in chat, but if you have other issues that arise, if you can't see the slides or the volume goes away or something happens, if you could put that in the chat, that will help us get to it faster than the Q&A box. And then finally, everyone always wants to know, when can I get the PowerPoint slides? When are you guys sharing this resource? So let you know right up from the beginning, next week, we'll be sending out a link with all of the slides for today, the final written report that goes along with this, that has all of the nuts and bolts and the resources and all of that. And also we are recording today's session, and that link will be available next week as well. So you're welcome to share that with other folks who you think might be interested. So I think that concludes our housekeeping. Okay, so our agenda for the rest of the day. First, we're going to have a little bit of background information, kind of get us all on the same playing field moving forward. Then we'll talk a little bit about the ecosystem values for Texas. And then we have a couple of case studies to help you understand how these values could be applied to existing projects in Texas and help you start visualizing how they can help you determine those benefit cost analyses for your communities. Okay, go ahead and move to the next one. So,
Slight delay. Can you see the next one now?
I can see introduction and background of this. Okay.
Great.
Is this one still mine, Annie, or is this where you take over?
So thank you so much for having us and for working with us on this project. Apologies if there is a slight slide delay, but the purpose, as Shara's really nicely set up, was to focus on Texas-specific ecosystem service benefit values to help with understanding the evaluation for nature-based solutions within the context of benefit cost analysis. So I'm just going to start to define some key terms and pieces of information that set up the context behind the study, and then we'll pass to Christina for the meat of the discussion on the values. But we were really focused on two project areas that do cover a very broad swath of Texas. Project Area 1 is comprised of HUD-eligible areas in accordance with the State of Texas Action Plan for Disaster Recovery from Hurricane Harvey. And Project Area 2 are the counties in the state under the Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Action Plan. And the map to the right is just showing that this really does cover a very significant portion of the state. We have both coastal and inland communities. And this really drove just what ecosystems we wanted to focus on, because we are not able to cover every single ecosystem. So we did have to do some prioritization. And so we'll go into some of that in prioritization criteria, but just to make you all aware, it's not just coastal, it's not just inland, we're really covering our bases. So what is nature-based solutions? What is green infrastructure? Many of you on the call probably already know this, but just some key concepts and definitions. Nature-based solutions refer to actions that manage or restore ecosystems to address societal challenges. It's a broad umbrella term. Green infrastructure is a more specific subset focused on using natural elements to manage stormwater and related infrastructure challenges. Green infrastructure is a type of nature-based solutions. By investing in nature-based solutions and green infrastructure, communities can both reduce risk and vulnerability, as well as achieve other co-benefits such as increased aesthetic value and habitat protection and lots of other benefits of green infrastructure. But to understand those benefits really requires evaluation of those co-benefits that they offer, and that's really what we're trying to do and focus on today, is the economic value of the benefits that these solutions provide, so as to inform project prioritization, design, evaluation. Examples of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure are shown here at a drawing concept level. So they can be in urban settings. We're looking at a rainwater harvesting system, permeable pavement on a parking lot, bioretention areas and planter boxes. And these are just some community plaza design concepts. And we also have some real photos of projects that have been built of bioswale in College Station. We have Green Nature Park and Stormwater Wetland in Houston. And then this is showing Sheldon Lake State Park, Prairie Wetland Restoration also in Houston. We wanted to open it up to the audience and just ask what types of nature-based solutions and green infrastructure your organization is currently using. And so to fill out this question, it'll be posted in the Teams chat, and hopefully you will have access to fill out the poll. And I'll just pause there for a moment. So some options we have are bioswales, wet ponds and stormwater basins, rain gardens, biodiversity retention, habitat restoration, or none. And feel free to click on those and then submit your vote, and then we can see the responses live. So far we have almost 30 responses. It looks like habitat restoration is in the lead, followed by rain gardens bioretention. Well, that's great that a lot of you all are considering this. And it's interesting that it's actually about pretty evenly split between these options. So that's very interesting to see. So since many of you have experience with it, you probably also know the challenges of evaluation and prioritization, especially when it comes to benefit cost analysis. Benefit cost analysis, I'll just define here some key terms related. It's a systematic process to identify, quantify, and compare the expected benefits and costs of an investment, action, or policy. There are two primary economic indicators we use in benefit cost analysis. The first is net present value, which is the dollar difference between the present value of a product's benefits and the present value of its costs over time. So it accounts for the time value of money, which simply means that $1 today is worth more than $1 in the future. And then the next is this benefit cost ratio, which is the ratio of benefits to costs. And a benefit cost ratio over 1 means that the project's benefits exceed its costs and is therefore can be considered cost effective. For example, a benefit cost ratio of 2 would mean that for every dollar invested, you realize $2 of benefit. And whether it's a new infrastructure investment, a program, or a policy, benefit cost analysis can help with that decision-making and prioritization process. These metrics just allow for comparison between project alternatives, especially in constrained funding environments when you can't fund every project, as well as in the context of competitive grant applications. So for that reason, there are toolkits available out there for many competitive grant programs. So FEMA has their own benefit cost analysis toolkit. The Texas Water Development Board has a benefit cost analysis input tool. This is just showing a screenshot of the different types of habitat that FEMA considers. And all you need to do if you're using one of these tools is input the acreage of habitat that is going to be impacted or benefiting from your project. And then it assigns a value, monetized value per acre to that acreage for each type of habitat. So for example, if your project is going to create coastal wetlands, you put in the acreage of the coastal wetlands, and then it multiplies it by that value per acre. It's pretty straightforward. However, these use standardized values that FEMA has developed, and they are built on national and international literature. They are not specific to Texas. And so the key behind our effort was to provide a more localized and contextualized way to value ecosystem services in Texas specifically. I will go over a little bit on the ecosystem services definitions and how the literature discusses and quantifies those just for a few slides. So Ecosystem services can be defined as direct and indirect benefits humans derive from natural ecosystems. This can include water filtration, flood mitigation, carbon sequestration, coastal protection, pollination, recreation. They vary widely depending on geographic location and ecological context, as well as how the study was designed to evaluate ecosystems. So there's a lot of literature out there. There's actually a concept or a framework defined by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was a global initiative launched in 2001 by over 1,300 scientists and experts, including representatives from the UN, from the World Bank, from the World Resources Institute, synthesizing existing science on how ecosystem changes affect human well-being. And they classified ecosystem services into 4 key categories. They use provisioning, regulating, cultural, and supporting. And the whole framework really just allows for a comprehensive and holistic understanding of the linkages between ecological and social systems. There are a lot of databases and resources out there on how to value ecosystem services. The more specific you're looking for, the harder it is to find the literature. But when you broaden your search, it becomes easier, and there are pretty amazing resources available out there. So we were already discussing the FEMA BCA toolkit. They use the 2021 ecosystem service value updates, or they did until recently, and then they have a variety of ecosystem types, and it's often was being used in hazard mitigation project evaluation. Then we have the Ecosystem Services Valuation Database, which is a comprehensive global database that compiles thousands of peer-reviewed valuation studies, includes metadata that can help you filter by ecosystem type, by benefit category, by region. It's a pretty amazing resource. And then there's Blue Value, which is a searchable database of ecosystem service information developed by Earth Economics. It's similar to the ESVD, but includes a more US focused inventory of studies, especially those that have been used in practice by local and regional governments. And I just want to point out, this is not an exhaustive list of all evaluation resources. Our report does have a lot of citations on various resources that we looked into. So that is hopefully just a helpful appendix and information to provide if you want to go and look for more information. But there's a lot out there, and this has been studied in many different ways with many different approaches from many different contexts and geographies. So with that, I'll pass to Christina to really emphasize and focus on the Texas-specific review.
Perfect. Thanks, Annie, and good afternoon, everybody. You can probably jump right to the next slide. As was mentioned, the goal of this study was to create more Texas-specific values that can be used in this BCA context. So specific to this study, we began with a wide array of desktop research and conversations with Charis and Christy and the GIFT team to identify specific priority ecosystems to focus on for this work. The goal was to choose the ecosystems most relevant to green infrastructure projects, or that had the most value in Texas at the moment, given the available literature. So the three key criteria that guided our approach was the specific relevance to green infrastructure projects, the availability of Texas-specific literature or studies that considered ecosystem service values within the state or the surrounding region, and the generalized ecological and geographical significance to Texas. So based on this, and I believe you can go to the next one. Yep. We prioritized wetlands, grasslands, prairies, grasslands and prairies combo, which we'll get into, and urban green open space. The review of the literature suggested the most availability of existing studies in these 3 categories. And we discussed all of our findings with the GIFT team to refine to these 3 ecosystems that are most important for green infrastructure. Next slide. I'll go into just a brief overview of what each of these are and some details about their relevance and importance in Texas. Wetlands are areas permanently or periodically saturated by water and typically only contain vegetative cover of about 20%. As Annie mentioned earlier, these can typically can either be coastal or inland, and they exist in both capacities in Texas. There are approximately 3.9 million acres of wetlands, which account for just over 2% of the state's land area. And it makes Texas the 5th largest U.S. state by wetland space. Texas wetlands support wildlife, they contribute to climate regulation and flood resilience, and they also play a significant role in outdoor recreation activity. The next slide is just a state map that attempts to, Texas is big, so it's hard to fit on one map on one slide, but the blue shading that you can see most intensely along the coast, as well as up those veins on the east side of the state, are the primary areas where both coastal and inland wetlands are present in Texas. Next slide, please. The second priority ecosystem, as I mentioned, we've dubbed grasslands and prairies. So grasslands are typically dominated by vegetation, predominantly grasses, and that typically accounts for about 80% of land cover. Prairies, including as well as steppes and savannas, are different subcategories of grasslands. So in Texas specifically, coastal grasslands make up the Gulf Coast prairies and marshes region, and then there are inland grasslands present in the High Plains, Cross Timbers, Oak Prairie, and Trans-Pecos ecoregions. Grasslands in Texas also provide habitat for 500 or more rare or endangered species across at least 115 counties. And importantly, the deep root system of grassland and prairie grasses play a key role in water infiltration and flood mitigation and prevention of soil erosion. Similarly, on the next slide, please, is a map giving an indication of how widespread grasslands and prairies are in Texas, which may not come as a surprise. A lot of rangeland and grazing space constitutes grasslands based on the species that are available for livestock feeding and things of that nature. So next, please. Last priority ecosystem that we were studying with this exercise is the urban green open space. And this one is a bit more complex than the previous two. Urban green open space, as it kind of sounds, is land area that is green, so dominated by vegetation, about 80% of the land area, but it has to be situated within or adjacent to urban environments. So the best way to think of urban green open space is parks, recreation areas, lawns, and green corridors that exist in and around major metropolitan areas. Most importantly, this is not actually an ecosystem as we use the term. This urban green open space is a land cover category as defined by FEMA, and it actually combines two different data sets to come to this determination. So the National Land Cover Database has a classification for developed open space, and then layering that with U.S. Census Bureau data determines what constitutes urban areas. So any areas with populations of more than 5,000 inhabitants. By this overlap, or the overlap of these two sources, there's approximately 700,000 acres of urban green open space in Texas. The state map on the far left here shows that it obviously sits very closely around the three or four major metropolitan areas. And then as you move to the center image and the right-hand side is just to give you a closer look at the fact that the blue, dark blue shading is the urban area, and then the yellow pockets are that green space within the urban areas. So the yellow is actually what we're after here in defining urban open space. Next slide, please. We're going to pause briefly for another poll question. Noting that we've highlighted these 3 priority ecosystems in this analysis, we'd be curious to know if there are other ecosystems that you would deem a priority specifically in Texas and would find value in understanding ecosystem service values. The few examples we have here are forests, riparian space, oyster reefs, deserts, or other. So please chime in with which other ecosystems you may find useful in future work. We've got an overwhelming response for riparian zones. So that is very interesting and helpful. About 52% of responses so far have opted for riparian, 26% for forests, and close 18% oyster reefs, with only a small portion interested in deserts. So this is all very useful. I think ideally the work that we've done for the priority ecosystems today will help inform future exercises to continue this analysis and get to ecosystem service values for other ecosystems. So definitely very useful to see what is of interest and of use to the audience. Moving on to our technical methodology, we predominantly relied on what's considered benefit transfer, which is to say you take existing economic values from previously conducted studies and apply them to a new location or within a new context. This requires selecting relevant studies that have already quantified ecosystem services and kind of gut checking them to make sure that transferring them in this way makes sense to your new locale or your new economic or demographic conditions. We tried to find as many relevant studies as possible, which means that we may have had multiple values for a particular ecosystem service. And at the end of the process, we averaged values for each individual ecosystem service and then summed the total for all ecosystem services within a priority ecosystem to come up with that value, that overall representation of value. Next slide, please. And I guess without further ado, this slide is the values. This is the nitty-gritty. This is what everything boils down to. So what you'll see here are the Texas-specific ecosystem service values for our 3 priority ecosystems. It's important to note that the values represented here have been inflation adjusted to reflect 2021 dollars. And the reason that's important is because most of the current tools, the FEMA BCA toolkit, the Texas Water Development Board tool, are all reliant on FEMA values, which are published in a 2021 dollar representation. So we did this for purposes of comparison, and that will come up a little bit later when we talk about this in an applied setting for the case studies. If you click once, Annie, I think the goal here is just to show that something like the singular value represented for wetlands in aesthetic value, that 921 represents an average of multiple studies that quantified the aesthetic value of wetlands. And then to get to the $19,000 per acre per year total, the column is summed to incorporate all ecosystem services within wetlands. You can go ahead to the next slide. The important question now is, what do we do with these values, right? The goal was to supplement existing BCA tools and provide more geographical and contextual relevance. At the moment, these are not a plug-in replacement for existing BCA tools, but they can be used in complementary ways to continue to inform project assessments at a more localized level. In particular, you can use the 3 priority ecosystem values to do standalone valuation if your project is in fact focused on wetlands, grasslands, and prairies, or urban green open space. And if you click one time, we've got a little example here of what that looks like. So you would take your acreage of a particular ecosystem, multiply by the dollars per acre per year for Texas specifically that we've derived here, and that will ultimately give you your estimated benefit value for the space. In addition, you go back just one second. The additional purposes or the additional uses for this data can include sensitivity testing. So using the FEMA BCA tool, for example, and then using the Texas values to do a comparison and see how more regionally specific or Texas specific values compare with the results you may get from FEMA. And then we're hoping that this will inform future tools and serve as a proof of concept for how creating localized estimates can continue to improve BCA tools in a more state-specific or locally specific context. And with that, I will pass back to Annie to give some case studies, ways to apply the values.
Thanks, Christina. So we wanted to show just at a hypothetical case study level what the application of these values looks like to make that it feel more real and attainable. So we chose a few case studies based on their relevance to the protection or restoration of one or more of the priority ecosystem services identified in the study. So wetlands, grasslands and prairies, and urban green open space. And then when applicable, we compared the evaluation with using FEMA nationally derived ecosystem service values as a side-by-side comparison. So the first project was Old River Cove. It's a coastal restoration initiative focused on enhancing and protecting marsh habitats and addressing erosion in the Lower Neches Wildlife Management Area in Orange County. The current work plans involved constructing new breakwater and establishing erosion reducing living shoreline using native marsh grasses. So the Old River Cove project anticipates 730 acres of wetland restoration. And when we apply the Texas specific wetlands value of the 19,000 per acre per year in monetized benefit, the total benefit comes to approximately 13.8 million. In contrast, if we use FEMA's national value of approximately 9,000 per acre per year, that results in a significantly lower estimate of 6.5 million. And so this example just illustrates how these Texas specific values can capture more of the benefits, offering a stronger economic basis for the justification of this project. Because if we compare those benefit cost ratios using the FEMA services value, it's less than 1, and using the Texas specific, it's 1.5. For Coastal Heritage Preserve, this is a project in West Galveston Island. It plans to expand protected coastal habitat by 500 acres, including approximately about 200 acres of interior wetlands and prairie. These ecosystems serve as a critical buffer zone, reducing flood and storm impacts on nearby communities. And these are key benefits that are captured in the Texas specific ecosystem service values. Importantly, the site's value goes beyond hazard mitigation. It supports over 30 migratory bird species and 12 listed species, adding unique conservation significance. These types of species specific benefits aren't easily monetized through standard valuation methods, and they are not fully captured in either the Texas specific or the FEMA value estimates. So that's just is an important limitation, and also important to have narrative accompanying what these ecosystem service values are able to capture and what they are not able to capture. But preserving 70 acres of wetlands and 128 acres of grassland prairie on West Galveston Island results in a total estimated ecosystem service benefit value of approximately 1.5 million using the Texas specific values developed for this study, and the wetlands valued at 19,000 per acre per year contributes 1.3 million, while grasslands and prairies valued at $2,000 per acre per year contribute about 200,000. And if we look at the FEMA evaluation approach, which values wetlands at 9,000 per acre per year, but doesn't assign a value to grasslands, it's a total estimate of only 600,000. So again, this is actually an example of how we're capturing a broader and more representative range of ecosystem service benefits, particularly for ecosystem types that may not be recognized in FEMA's framework. And then the habitat provision and endangered species preservation may warrant additional evaluation beyond standard ecosystem service estimates to more fully reflect the project's broader ecological value. This in strict BCR terms is not cost effective, and that the benefits are still less than one. So within this, it's still not considered cost effective, but we do see that the Texas specific values yield higher total benefits. One more, One more case study. This is the headwaters at the Comal. It's a 16-acre restoration project at the headwaters of the Comal River. And it's half of a 16-acre project area being actively restored to native prairie. The other half is going to contain educational facilities and parking infrastructure that will have permeable pavement and other green infrastructure features. For this project, there's 8 acres of prairie and 8 acres of urban green open space. And if we apply the urban green open space values, if we apply the Texas specific values for the prairie and grasslands and prairies and urban green open space, then we come to this 16,000 and 160,000, so just over 176,000. If we compare that to the FEMA valuation approach, that's a lower value, and it's resulting in a total of 124,000. So again, this project has a small land area and relatively high total cost, about 23 million. So again, neither are considered cost effective in the extreme, in the economic terms of benefit cost ratio. But again, the Texas specific values yield higher total benefits than the FEMA national averages. With that, I will pass it to Charis to just discuss some additional resources that GIFT offers in the realm of green infrastructure and nature-based solutions.
Well, thanks, Annie and Christina, for going through all of that. This is only one piece of what the GIFT team has been working on, and I neglected to say at the very beginning that this project is funded by the Texas General Land Office. It's very important to note. And they have also been funding some additional resources and things that are out there, including an online course that's an introduction for green infrastructure. It's a self-paced course, takes an hour, maybe a little bit less. Great for community leaders and decision makers to understand what these practices are and how they can be used. We have a series of Texas-specific case studies. So these are projects not that the GIFT team has done, but that other organizations across the state have worked on. And we have 7 different examples of how and where green infrastructure is being used. And those are available on our website. And then finally, we are also working on some green infrastructure design sets. So this is a resource for engineers and designers that includes drawings and calculations, as well as photos of kind of how to get started designing a green infrastructure practice that if you're not sure where to start, it kind of groups all the information into one place to give you that starting point. So those will be ready in a few weeks. The others are available right now. If you go to the next page. There we go. So the top QR code will take you to the gift website, where you can find the case studies and the link to the online course. The QR code at the bottom will take you to the landing page where the report for this BCA study will be available next week. And it will be available easily shareable from that link. So the study has even more detail than we were able to present today. It also has a supplemental analysis looking at recreational use values in Texas using some state park data. So sometimes it's hard to, recreation is sort of an ecosystem service, but also sort of not. But kind of trying to value things like walking trails and folks who come out and use maybe a nature park for recreation, for walking or for running or for riding bikes. And so a look into the Texas-specific data based on state park usage fees that we could potentially apply to those as another way to value some of the benefits from these projects. So all of that is available in the report, as well as all of the details from this case study. And we will be sharing that with you guys next week. So we want to open the floor to questions. I don't know that we have anything in the Q&A box yet, but Christy, if we do, go ahead and ask those, or if anyone else has questions, you can raise your hand and we can open it up. I think Christy can unmute you and let you answer your question, ask your question.
Sean, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation today, and all of the work that has gone into this report looks pretty substantial. I'm very excited about it. Hopefully I'll be able to use it in my research. I do have a couple of questions related to, these are more specific to the open green space because that's my area of research. And I might have missed it, but just a question on the, where you were talking about combining the NLCD developed open green space with census areas that represented urban. And I think it had something to do with 5,000 people. My question on that is that a category within the Census Bureau information, or was that taken from like block group sizes, or how did you come up with the greater than 5,000?
That's a great question. 5,000 is officially designated as the cutoff for the difference between rural and urban populations by the U.S. Census Bureau. So that is something you will see and find in U.S. Census data. It just as a side fact, up until the 2010 census, the definition of rural cutoff was 2,000 residents, and as of most recently, that's been increased because of to reflect the changes in demographics over time. So when you do look to, like, let's say specifically where your project is located, if you look at the census block group population, yep, that 5,000 cutoff will be applicable there. So you can theoretically look up your block group or each of the block groups that are spanning your area of interest to determine whether they fit that threshold.
Okay. And Also, something kind of specific to Exploration Green, and I don't know how familiar you are with that. It's actually one of the chapters, and I know Charis is, but it's one of the chapters in my dissertation. And when looking at the valuation of those services, because it's a multifunctional park, it has several different services that it provides. So it's open green space, it's got walking trails and biking trails, but it also has trees and wetlands. So I would be kind of curious, and this is more an opinion or your thoughts on it, would be do you break all of that out separately? Because the park as a whole is like 200 acres of open green space, but it includes like 40 acres of wetlands. So within that 200. So not to double count, would you say that it's 200 acres of open green space or 160 acres of open green space and 40 acres of wetlands? Does that make sense?
It does, and it's a very good question. I'll chime in quickly and then see if Annie or Charis have any input. But there are no strict requirements is the short answer. So as it pertains to the tools themselves, you can use your best judgment. It could be interesting to see how the values shake out, whether you go one way or the other. In an ideal world, if the land types and the data is available to allow you to differentiate, I think that is the most correct way to approach it. So to your, the latter point, if you know exactly that X% is wetlands and X% is urban green space, and you can make that differentiation, then that would be the correct way to go about it. So hopefully that helps and is aligned. I see Annie nodding, but if you guys want to add anything more, that would be helpful.
One last quick question. Does the report have all of the literature references, the references for the literature that was used to create the tool?
Yes. Yep. What you'll see in the report is separate discussions by priority ecosystem with exactly which studies go in to comprise these ecosystem service values specifically. And then at the very end of the report is a full references section. So anything else that's referenced within the text or in passing is also available. So it should be a pretty good source or repository of information in that regard.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate y'all's time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for your questions.
So Patrick has a question in the Q&A. If the whole life cycle cost analysis are increasingly common when evaluating projects, these account for operation, maintenance, and other costs. Do the tools incorporate this?
I'll just flag that the values we've created are not living in a tool. These are ecosystem service values that will eventually live in a tool. So we haven't done like embedding in tools as part of this effort. However, tools like the Texas Water Development Benefit Cost Analysis tool that we cited earlier that we hope eventually would incorporate these values does account for, I believe, upfront CapEx as well as ongoing maintenance and operations costs. And the FEMA BCA toolkit also does account for life cycle costs.
Thank you. Nathan asked, how were the ecosystem categories determined to apply to each ecosystem? Specifically, or example would be soil quality had a value for grasslands and prairies using urban green space. So while urban green open spaces did not have a value.
Yep, that's a good question. So wherever you see blanks represent the fact that we did not or could not find literature that actively looked at that ecosystem service for that ecosystem. So to your example, the fact that soil quality has a value for grasslands and prairies, we distinctly had research to support that value for that ecosystem, whereas for urban green open space and wetlands, there either are not studies available, or potentially, I don't know off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the back data, but either there were no studies available, or if there were studies that discussed it, we did run into some cases where they did not quantify it. So to the extent we found research that discussed certain ecosystem services, but they didn't do it in a quantitative fashion, we weren't able to use that benefit transfer methodology to bring the value forward or bring it into this Texas context. So hopefully that helps clarify. Perfect.
Another quick question. Rebecca asked, how long did it take to develop this guidance?
We have
what are we
been
at
working
now?
on this about maybe six months, I would say, is the right ballpark.
Yeah, we took a pretty intense approach to it to see. They spent a lot of time digging through the literature and synthesizing everything to get us to this point pretty quickly. I would say, I think the questions that we're hearing from you guys today are helping us all continue to work through how difficult it is to value these ecosystem services. We're all working with the best available data, but there is that continued and ongoing need for the economic work that supports these values, for the air quality, the soil quality, being able to have that science-based data that's out there in peer-reviewed published journals that we can rely upon to really make the case is very important. And even looking at this slide, we can see the number of gaps that still exist. I will say that Texas General Land Office is using these values that we've developed as part of their River Basin Flood Studies project, and their vendors are incorporating that into the benefit cost analysis work that they are doing for that project. And we've been talking to the Texas Water Development Board throughout since before we started the project. And we do feel pretty confident that future iterations of the Water Development Board tool will incorporate these values as well. And we are hoping, at least I am hoping, that moving forward, we can find some additional funding to help fill in some of those gaps. That's part of the reason why we pulled you guys and asked what else you'd like to see, as we continue to build out this repository of data specifically related to our Texas ecosystems. And so I'd encourage anybody who is doing research or works with professors to help encourage the research to continue with this. Misty, I think we have some more questions.
Yes, Clay asked, when it comes to the urban green spaces, would urban lands that function more like wetlands for flood and storm hazard risk reductions, like the San Antonio River, be valued as wetlands or urban green space?
I'm gonna say it depends where you're focusing. And I know that leads to some general inconsistency, but like if your project is aimed at an area that captures, by the definition, urban space in which the San Antonio River is a part, then at least in my mind, off the cuff, I would say urban green space. But I don't know, Annie or Charis, do you have any thoughts or opinions otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's definitely context specific. It's also what the project is. If the project's like really focused on wetland restoration, then I would think about using the wetlands value. So it does depend on the location and what the purpose of the project is and what ecosystem is benefiting from the project. But I think going back to, I think it was Sean's question earlier, and related to Christina's responses, the guidance is not entirely clear on, it's not overly prescriptive. So it does allow the user to make some informed decisions on which they input, as long as you have documentation backing up why you're doing the selection you're doing. That's what really matters.
And I think this is an instance where if we had a riparian value available, that would probably be the most appropriate for this situation. We're just kind of not there yet. So in the meantime, take your pick.
And I suppose in the context of the values from this study, the differential between wetlands and urban green space is only about $1,000 after, inclusive of rounding. So you wouldn't necessarily be dealing with a big variance. Obviously, if you're talking urban green open space versus grasslands, there's a more considerable difference there. So that idea that Annie pointed out of like having a rationale and being able to substantiate your choice becomes very important.
While we wait on other additional questions, I might just pose a question to the group, if folks are open to answering, of just what are some challenges that you have come across when trying to evaluate or demonstrate the benefits of green infrastructure in your work?
I think if you want to answer that, you either need to put it in the chat or raise your hand. But we do have another question that has come in as well.
That first. Okay, well, while you guys think about that, Christy, what's the next question?
Okay, I just posted Annie's question in the Q&A, so we could put responses there under the comments. And Meredith asked, while doing the research, were there any ecosystem service values that were smaller or larger than you were expecting?
I'll throw two things out there to start. A couple of times in this presentation, we mentioned endangered species or habitat protection. And what becomes very interesting in this work is the fact that there are existing studies that have looked at either one or a small subset of species. And that is essentially what informs the value. And my very unofficial example that I've been throwing around to Annie and Charis through all of this is, if a study puts a value on saving bald eagles, is it appropriate to take that value and apply it to a project that might be protecting significant butterfly populations? So I know it doesn't answer the question directly, but I think what we've learned or what we've realized is that you do have to be kind of judicious in understanding what underlies the values, so that you're making your best judgment as to whether and how it's applicable to your project. The same can be said for recreation, and I'll point you all to the appendix of the full report where we did kind of a supplemental recreation analysis, because again, there's very large differences between being a small city park or being an admission-based, very robust state facility, thinking of all the things that run the spectrum of recreation and how you appropriately attribute value to that doesn't fit very cleanly in this idea of recreation as an ecosystem service. So similar to the comments that we've made about the maybe more pointed analysis related to species involvement or species improvements, the same would go for recreation. So I would say not necessarily we were seeing smaller or larger values, but that you want to be careful about those in particular, in addition to understanding what underlies the values that feed all of this work.
I'll weigh in on that question. I will say intuitively, the value for prairies feels low to me. It's the value that is based in the literature and the data that is available. It is a category where I feel like additional studies could get us to a different value. I don't know what that value is, but seeing that value of $2,000 an acre just, I don't know, maybe it's just because I like prairies, but it feels on the low end of things for me.
To also open it up to the chat, if you wanted to put in the chat, if there's any values here that you think are surprising, it would be interesting to hear.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for the questions. If you have additional thoughts you want to share with us in the chat, we would love to hear them, but I don't want to keep you guys any longer than we need to. So thank you for spending your time with us today. Watch for some emails next week with us, from us with the slides and the report, and then again, the link. We're recording this and you guys will be able to share that out as well. So we'll stay on for just a few more minutes to wrap up the comments. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you to our presenters. Annie or Christina, there's a question from Dean in the chat. If one of you,
Sure. I was just typing a response, but I can address it here too. I'm
fine with either.
Yeah, very generally, aesthetic value as an ecosystem service, what we've found is that it's almost exclusively, I say almost, I'd have to look back, but almost exclusively focuses on hedonic price analysis related to properties that may take on additional value for their proximity to green space. So an example in terms of urban green open space, it's typically that homes within a certain radius of a park actually have a higher market value because of their proximity to said park. On the wetlands side, I would have to look back at the ultimate rationale, but on the prairies front, the correlation is generally that prairies tend to be much more rural areas. And what the hedonic pricing studies that we've looked at for this work have found is that rural properties don't really have that same baked in additional value for their proximity to green space. It's kind of assumed that, you know, you bought a farm, you knew what you were getting into, the farm is in a green rural area, therefore there's no added value for being close to a green space. And that's what's kind of baked into that concept of aesthetic value. Sure. Thanks for the question.
Okay, and with that, I think we're going to close things out. Thanks so much, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks again.
Thank you.